Funziona? Yeah. Laura, vuoi iniziare? Vuoi andare lì? Qui, poi innanzi va via. Sì. Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Laura De Giorgi. I am the head of the Department of Asia and African Studies, and I'm here on behalf of our rector, Professor Tiziana Lipiello, to convey my best greetings and welcome and best wishes to today's event. I'm very happy that we have such an esteemed honored guest from Harvard, and I'm very grateful to NICHE and Professor Tarocco for having organized this lecture. You know, our department hosts and manages a MA program on environmental humanities, and we are very proud of it. And I think that we are several students from that program, and also PhD students from the doctoral program on religion. And I'm sure that we will have a wonderful opportunity to learn and to think about also how a different attitudes over our world can change our future and also our inner self. I think that the two things are quite connected. So I'm really looking forward to this, today's lecture, and I think we will all have a very significant experience. And so just a few words on behalf of the rector, and thanks again to our guest and to NICHE and NICHE director, Professor Francesca Tarocco. We are very grateful as the partner for what she does for our MA program and for all the university and faculty who, in terms of opportunities for discussion, for learning, and for rethinking ourselves. So I wish all of you a fruitful afternoon. This one, right? Yeah. Maybe you can say. Hi, hello everyone, and thank you for being here and online. So I'm Francesca Tarocco, the director of NICHE, as you heard, the new institute, Center for Environmental Humanities at Ca' Foscari University, and this is our third annual lecture, and we have come a long way since the center first started a few years back. And today I would like to extend my gratitude to our rector, Professor Lipiello, for her continuing support of our efforts, and to Professor Gyatso for accepting our invitation to deliver the annual lecture. And I also want to thank all our colleagues at NICHE, especially Roberta D'Argenio, Anna Zerbini, Giulia Brolese, Alessandra Bonesso, and all the others at CESA who make all of this possible. Grazie. Yeah. And of course, all the students and doctoral students and colleagues and fellows that give life to the center. I'm just going to say a few words before the lecture, as a few considerations on our work. As we begin to recover from the COVID pandemic and face some of the hottest and driest summers on record, and look to the future, our new normal is filled with uncertainty and likely with more frequent disruption. This is why together we need to explore some difficult questions. How can we come together, embrace the change offered by the current disruption, and build greater resilience? Which aspects of traditional practice have not served us well as people, as professionals and institutions? And how can we rebuild more sustainably, more equitably? And what is the role, finally, of universities and research centers in bridging divides, bringing communities together, and building empathy, understanding, and even belonging? And I'm very much looking forward to our discussion here today with the help of Janet Gyatso. And I know that our work on these challenges and many other challenges will not end when our meeting concludes. So what do we do at NICHE and what do we propose to do? We aim to produce transdisciplinary scholarship and public engagement initiatives where environmental humanities can play a major role.
and the task of reconceptualizing planetary change for the human imagination calls on a wide range of disciplinary knowledge and practices. Shared problems, places, and scales form the basis for collaborative work in the environmental humanities in partnership with the natural sciences and the creative arts. Shifting the framework of environmental research to be more consciously inclusive and diverse is enabling concepts of the physical world that better include humans and take ethics beyond humans to consider more than human subjects. The ecological humanities, as we could also call them, offer a utopian vision of meta-communities of humans and non-humans based on symbiotic relations, co-evolution, and codependency. Here we focus particularly on water and water methodologies. We aim to study, understand, and support all those involved with water, waterscapes, and climate justice, thereby contributing to more equitable nature-entwined water governance. But now let's come to our wonderful speaker today. Professor Janet Gyatso is a specialist in Buddhist studies, concentrating on Tibetan and South Asian cultural and intellectual history. She has made substantial and influential contribution to the field. Her paradigm-shifting approach is to take a topic, a term, one that had long been taken for granted or even overlooked, and turn it inside out, and radically reimagine the kinds of questions that might be asked and what novel answers might reveal. Her highly acclaimed book, Being Human in a Buddhist World, An Intellectual History of Medicine in Early Modern Tibet, focuses on alternative early modernities and the conjunction and disjunctures between religion and scientific epistemologies in Tibetan medicine in the 16th to 18th centuries. She has also written extensively on sex and gender, on female ordination, on visionary revelation in Buddhism, on lineage, memory, and authorship, and the philosophy of experience, and also on autobiographical writing in Tibet. In today's talk, Professor Gyatso does something really compelling. She explores animal life, which is an essential component of both the climate change crisis and the possibility of continued flourishing of life. And she focuses on ethical practices, some coming out of Buddhist ethics, but she, of course, says not all, for cultivating attention, recognition, and commitment to the perspectives and values of animal intelligence. Thank you. You're going to stand, so. Okay. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. Yes, it's wonderful to be here, and this beautiful city, this fantastic university. Great thanks to Francesca Tarocco for inviting me, and to NICHE for having this lecture series. And I also want to recognize my good friend Ronit Yoeli-Klavim, who was also instrumental in me being invited here. So thank you all very much. It's wonderful to have a chance to speak with you. So my talk is entitled Practices of Being with Animals, Motivating Responsibility on Planet Earth. So a fundamental issue that has emerged in the climate change crisis has to do with the effectiveness of structural change versus the effectiveness of individual efforts. Structural change includes local, national, and global regulation, international treaties, public policy, technological capacity building, infrastructure. But there is a growing sentiment that the individual agency is limited within these important initiatives, that personal actions, such as not eating avocados or meticulously recycling our waste, have almost no impact. And I certainly agree we should not feel like we're doing enough, especially if individual measures are the only steps that we take. But I disagree with the larger premise. We should not devalue the power of individual action. Individual action becomes consumer power, and even more so, personal motivation and ethical imperative, both on the part of individual actors, as well as in terms of the embedded cultural values of corporate and environmental and governmental action,
are the critical frontier for climate change action to happen. Far too often, the question of ethical motivation, far too often, the question of ethical motivation is relegated to the obvious or the readily assumed in climate mitigation discussion, not to mention the motivating power of the humanities. And most recently, I myself have found this out in attempting to introduce environmental humanities curricular initiatives at Harvard University, where we found strong resistance to this effort. And I myself still am trying to argue, so we don't have anything like you have here at Harvard. And I'm trying to argue that both sides of the equation, the personal and the social structure, are both crucial in our efforts to have a decent chance of holding off catastrophe. So my talk today is based on a book that I'm currently writing on animal ethics. Animal issues are a subset of the climate crisis, both because of the climate impact of animal farming and a larger question about the sustainability of human flourishing on this planet. My project emphasizes the latter. It is directly informed by my background in the Buddhist ethics of compassion and Buddhist practice techniques. But is most fundamentally informed by my own deep sorrow and compassion at the extraordinarily horrific suffering being visited upon animals by the factory farming agro-industrial complex today, as well as in cruel and unnecessary scientific experimentation. Every day, billions of animals experience unspeakable physical and psychological pain from our brutal global animal practices. None of that is to pass over the other huge issues around animals on planet Earth, the direct contributions of animal agriculture, overgrazing to climate change and environmental degradation has been well documented. And so while not addressing those issues directly today, my hope is that the moral motivational enhancement that I am proposing will equally contribute to ameliorating those more structural problems, as well as serving to care better for our animal kin on planet Earth. My book project is also closely informed by modern Western philosophical discussions of animal rights, by contemporary scientific scholarship in animal studies, especially ethology and anthropology, and by contemporary activist writings in animal studies. But even with all of this new great work, I remain concerned about the disconnect between what we know about the intelligence of animals, along with our rational arguments of why we should care for them, and what we're actually willing to do about it. I think of this especially in the realm of philosophical ethics. I call it the Kant problem. The intricately reasoned writings of the most important ethicist of the modern West, Immanuel Kant, did not serve to prevent his own future countrymen from carrying out the insanely brutal Holocaust of World War II and many other atrocities. So far in human history, even the most eloquent and persuasive, not to mention rational, ethical guidance has not managed to prevent human selfishness, greed, and cruelty. Far from it. Burma, a country that has fostered great Buddhist meditators and thinkers, is committing atrocities against its own people in our day. So is China, home of one of the oldest and most brilliant traditions of philosophical ethics in the world. And certainly the United States, my own home country, is far from protecting the rights of all of its communities, despite being founded upon its vaunted principles of democracy. I would even like to add my own personal case as a special example. I myself, possibly one of the biggest animal lovers of all times on this planet, it's true, have still not entirely weaned myself from eating meat and using dairy products, despite what I know about the utter misery of the animals that produce the food for me. While the larger ethics of veganism need more discussion, there can be no question that to eat factory farm meat is to be complicit in its cruelty and is irresponsible. And yet my resolve sometimes fails me. I will say, however, that since beginning this project 2 years ago, I have made a lot of progress towards largely eating vegan. Doing the practices that I'm going to shortly describe, not to mention thinking about animal ethics night and day, has graced me with far more knowledge and understanding of animals than I have ever had before. I never would have thought that I needed more compassion and empathy with animals than I already have since I was a baby, but I do. I realized that the real-time sacrifices, not just responsibility, but personal sacrifice that we will need in order to truly commit to the needed actions to solve the animal crisis and, of course, the very connected climate crisis is going to be a challenge for everyone. And so I remain convinced that in addition to adding more knowledge and in addition to sharpening our logical arguments for our responsibility to our animal kin on planet Earth, we need to train our embodied being itself. After all, it is in the rush of desire and habit and willful ignorance that we often act rather than directed by our rational minds. I believe that seeing itself is as much an embodied practice as it is an interpretational act rooted in the brain alone. Thus, this talk is going to be about how to see animals better, how to motivationalize ourselves to continue to do that seeing, in the hopes that seeing animals will motivate us to do what is better, what is necessary to get rid of brutality against animals. In short, I'm pressing for this kind of stark realization I want for us all to have, such as can be put in terms of a stark equation about meat eating, namely, to put it bluntly. That's not working. What? Oh, wait. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. To put it bluntly. See that? See that? Equal. Know the equal sign? So this equals that and that. Repeat. Equals. See the steak? It's delicious. Equals. Remember that. See those guys? And one of them's gone and they're crying. And I want to thank my my partner in this animal work, climate artist Maisie Lowe, for these images. So I'm going to go back to our leopard friend for a moment. So actually, when we see this equation, we would be building both. So when we see this equation, we'll be building both on our ability to fully see the suffering of that mother cow and our ability to fully see the moral implications of that equal sign. And so in pushing for our cultivation of our ability to see animals, it's not the case that I'm against rational argument, for that too is key to ethical commitment. And my book project, in fact, argues for the Buddhist principle of interdependence as the ontological ground of ethics in abstract terms. The ontological fact of interdependence has foundational implications for our very identity as persons, conceptualized by Japanese philosopher Watsuji Tetsuro as a phenomenon of betweenness, or ningen. In terms of our responsibility to the welfare of others, it means that we cannot distinguish absolutely between ourselves and others in questions of whose needs we are obliged to the most. The ontological fact of our interdependence also has correlates in psychological, social, emotional, even physiological and biological terms. In other words, it is an abstract philosophy, but it also can be felt or detected in a variety of registers. The great Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh speaks of the existential fact of our interdependent lives as interbeing. This is a way of describing the ontology of our being, but it also lends an authoritative impetus to its implementation. Since it is true, we are obliged to own it, as it were. And if you know your Kant, you can say at this point that Kant is coming back into the equation, despite what I said about Immanuel Kant a few moments ago, blaming the Holocaust on him. No, I'm not doing that, but I'm just saying he didn't solve it. Anyway, the global significance of this principle governs all life and even all inanimate processes such as climate and rivers and water and canals on planet Earth. It demands that our anthropocentric bias be tempered by a reckoning within our place within the larger ecosystem. Taking it as our leading term promises to lay bare the many missteps of the Anthropocene. It makes us realize a multiplicity of points of view or scales of value or even metrics of truth in all alternate ways. This means that my talk today is also dedicated to advancing and widening our access to alternative epistemologies on this planet. It's an effort to recognize the possibly equal, if not superior, perspective of other creatures on our planet. It is why I have invited a leopard to listen to my talk today, to remind me to remain mindful of what her point of view on the matters I'm raising would be. And of course, it could be any creature, but I like her intent gaze. This is actually part of an advertising pamphlet that I received in the mail sometime back, and it really spoke to me. So I knew that I needed to bring her to this lecture as well. She commanded me to bring her along. So I hope you like it. Don't bite me. Okay, so practices. Interdependent interbeing or betweenness is a fact, but it also can be, and it needs to be, cultivated. My own term for the principle of interdependent interbeing is what I'm calling being with a dash between it. Being with as a concept is especially suited to the kinds of practices I'm cultivating. It is less of an ontological claim than a description of how we live in honor of the ontological fact. Being with is what I'm asking humans to do. It is also what animals already do extremely well. Being with has to do with staying in the present, first of all, or what I am calling the thick present, which is something that at which animals excel, far exceeding humans. Being with is about present attention, present intimacy with others around us, and the present is important. Present heeding of our environment. And so what I'm proposing for daily practice are practices of being with other animals on planet Earth as a way of intensifying our awareness and especially appreciation of what where we're actually doing it all the time, but we're always losing sight of it. And then learn how to do it better in more aware and focused, compassionate ways. Okay, so practice number one, social media. This may surprise you, and indeed it surprised me when the very old school me first discovered Instagram, a paltry about 4 years ago, so don't laugh. But it's enormous potential for animal studies. So I'm not talking about posting on social media, I'm talking about watching it and seeing. So my realization of the role of the internet in animal studies coincided with the first time I taught a course on animal ethics at Harvard. Worried about the lack of ethological data in what I was going to claim to my students, and after briefly fantasizing that I would hold my own class on various farms and animal sanctuaries around Boston, I realized how much raw data on animal behavior is actually available on the internet. I'm mostly limiting this to Instagram, and no, Instagram didn't pay me for this plug, but Instagram's amazing. And of course, it all depends on the algorithms that delivers what you want and not, but my feed is amazing. And after coming to know the delightfully artful Instagram accounts devoted to Maru the cat in Japan, the extraordinary Turkish cat lover, piano player Sarper Duman, I discovered on the same platform the enormous amount of raw footage taken by ethologists in the field, photographers who leave live cameras in wild places, diligent game wardens in Africa, intimate and detailed footage of birds building nests, meticulously caring for the young, wild stallion competition, dogs protecting goats, whales surfing waves for fun, etc. And also a lot of kind of silly stuff of people dressing up their pets in human clothes, which I really hate, and getting them to press buttons to make human words. But there also are tons of fascinating short original videos by people with their pets and the interaction that's going on between them and their pets, which is often brilliant and so and really worth watching. So I'm recommending that those of you who want to do better by animals on planet Earth start by watching these posts daily. Yes, you can start by following me on Instagram and all the stuff that I repost in a curated selection of the unbelievably amazing and priceless gems I see every day. But please note that the primary purpose of this exercise is not to learn more about animal behavior. You surely will be doing that. But a more critical purpose is rather second order. That is to cultivate your capacity to see, to practice close seeing, to get good at watching and discerning. Not only to read animal body language, although that's already a big one, but also to detect their feelings and desires. And that is possible. And really so much can be detected, even in those tiny frames that Instagram delivers. But most of all, though, the purpose of the exercise is to enjoy, to love them, enjoy them in all the ways human children and adults so naturally do, or at least most humans. We can talk about that in the Q&A if you like. But to exult in their astonishing physical agility, their intelligence, admire their astonishing grace, even in animals we usually think of as plodding and heavy, such as rhinos, who are also amazingly graceful, I have learned from Instagram. Not only is it amazing, but the important point for us is to reinforce and build our admiration for animals, recognize this not as a childish exercise, but an effort to build human valuing of animals, to take them seriously as actors, as agents, sentient beings who are living their own lives according to their own compass and are not here on planet Earth to serve humans. So here are some examples chosen almost randomly from the huge archive on Instagram that I have saved on multiple species. And first, I want to just acknowledge the fact that I am focusing on the low-hanging fruit, namely the charismatic animals. I'm doing that on purpose to make a point, which then can be extended to the full range of sentient beings. But even if we restrict our attention now primarily to those familiar mammals and birds, let's say, and learn to care more for them, that's already a huge gain. They can serve as the first ambassadors for the rest. And keep in mind too that it is primarily those familiar animals, so farmed cows, abused sheep, brutalized pigs, chained dogs, confined horses, working donkeys and camels, caged birds, who are the main victims of human malfeasance. So I'm going to start with a few examples of watching the way that animals simply be with each other. So we'll have our first video. Don't laugh, this is very obvious, but we can still take that. You can turn the sound up. Now, what are these guys doing? Can you hear them purring? Can you turn the sound up on this one? You hear that sound? Can you play again? You can just play it again. I'm interested in the way animals love to be close with each other. I'm interested in warmth, the phenomenon of warmth between creatures. I'm interested in softness, which they understand very well, the way they lean on each other, the way they're in the present. I actually also think that purring itself, the vibration of the body, is a way of being in the present. It's just like sort of not going anywhere, but just sticking there and sort of just acknowledging, staying, going back and forth. I think it's amazing. Okay, no, we can stay with the videos. Okay. And I also will say that in watching these videos, not only do we become turned on to how amazing and interesting they are and their activities, but we as humans also learn from them. So, we as humans can learn how we should all sleep together in piles like this. No, I'm just joking, but anyway, greater intimacy. We have a, okay, wait a minute. Okay, sorry, back to the PowerPoint for a moment. Just a couple of photos again. Okay, just random wolves, one wolf greeting each other in the wild. What do they do? Just the way that one wraps around the other, just the way that they appreciate each other bodily, just really impresses me, just the beauty of that. They're being with each other. You look at the expression in their eyes. This is everyday practice for them. There's another one of horses. It's not a very good image. Horses do this all the time. They have these long, whatever it's called, snouts. And I sort of think that the purpose of these snouts is so they can be closer to each other. They like keep their snouts together. There's something, see those two guys, like they don't exactly touch, but they're smelling each other. They're feeling the breathing of each other. They are looking together. Obviously, humans do this as well, but animals do it more, animals do it better. And I myself exult in the pleasure of watching that. It also happens interspecies wise, so we can go back to the videos now. Thank you, Paolo, up there, who's out there, who's very nicely accommodating my visuals. So the next video. The next video. Oh, it's okay. Okay, watch this. And this without sound. Look at this. It's like a horse who's chained up, and they're friends. You know, nobody made them do this. I don't know the, you know, circumstances, but this random dog who lives near this stable, they become good friends. And look how they express their friendship. You know, why are they doing that? They're appreciating the smell together. They're appreciating each other. They're just being close. And, you know, this guy is laying down. But look at his tail wagging. There are infinite examples of interspecies connections of this sort, which are just really, really amazing. Cows and cats, for example, there's incredible videos of cows in a field, and they are up against the fence, and there's a cat outside, and all the cows are sticking their heads out to kiss the cat, you know, or cats and turtles. Can you believe it? Cats become friends with turtles. Turtles become friends with cats. Turtles play with cats. I mean, it's just amazing. Cats and birds. There's all kinds of, I would have known this. There's all kinds of videos of like a cat laying down and 4 tiny chicks, you know, sleeping with it. I mean, we thought that cats eat them. You know, usually they do, but they don't always. It's just like amazing. Okay. Playing and mothering. Here's another one. So next one. Okay. This is a wild, he's not a crow, I'm sorry. Macaw, what kind of bird is this? This is a wild bird and a dog who lives with somebody. And Peggy and Molly, they're actually quite famous. And actually, this is in Australia. And this bird has recognized this dog, came flying in from the woods, and then became friends with the dog. And they're sleeping together. A bird is sleeping under this dog. And actually, the Australian government took this bird away. Actually, recently, you may have caught this. And they're now trying to get the bird to come back. Just, you know, how did this friendship happen? You know, these kind of birds are actually very, very intelligent. I'm sure you know that. They like dogs. They also like wolves, and they're very playful. And how they live, how they stay together. Okay. All right, good. Go to sleep. Okay, we can go to the next one.
So let's keep quiet.
It's just another example. This is from Argentina, I believe. So what happened? Yeah, we can have the audio for this one. This is some guy who I think helped this cow give birth. So the calf was just born, and the mother is thanking the guy. Look at this cow, and look at the guy, the way he responds, and how this like incredible affection. But the cow itself, the incredible gratitude that the cow is, you know, and look at him, he's actually crying. So yeah, there you go. Just really, really beautiful and amazing kind of stuff. Okay, a couple more now. So we can go to the next one. So this is not really about animals. I'm not trying to make an argument of what animals can do, but what we can watch. But this is about moral responsibility. This is a guy with his dogs. Look, his dog is going crazy. He's going to save his owner. He has no idea that the owner is having good, but how devoted he is to the human who's swimming. And he's screaming and crying. The other dog's already with him. The guy is laughing. But just the, amazing devotion and care for, and his observance of what's happening with the dog. You can watch the dodo. Okay. All right, can we go to the next one? This is really cool. Yeah. What's going on here? What's going on? What? Yeah, the cow's breaking up the fight. He's standing between them. He says he doesn't want the dogs to fight. It's just really amazing. Okay, wanna watch that again? Can we just see that one more time? Just watch it. Watch the cow's body. What he's doing. These dogs are fighting. And he's yelling at them. He said, get the hell out of here. Move. Okay. So the cows giving moral directions to dogs. Okay. Okay, we can see the next one as well, and a similar example. Okay. Cat's fighting. Does one cat try to break up the fight? This is the big, tough cat. Look at him. Look at his face. He said, don't mess with me, right? Can we play that one again? Wait for boss, right? Yeah. Watch. This guy, he's trying to figure out what to do. Boom. Okay. Break it up, folks. Look at him. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then I think I have one more. This is just a sort of a different example. Yeah, the next one. These are actually some wolves and bears in Montana. So there's some bears, there's some wolves, there's some crows. The wolves, the bears are scaring away the wolves. Because they're all trying to fish, right? But yeah, wait. Did it stop? What is that? Yeah. Yeah. But then okay, is that the end? It goes a little longer. So the wolves come down the thing. So what I'm trying to show is how even though there is a natural enmity between the bears and the wolves, they also figured it out. And the wolf and the bears sort of gave up and allowed the wolves to come down. And so they're managing to live together. And by the way, I'll just mention that crows, again, like the other case that we saw, crows and wolves have a very close relationship, and the crows sometimes lead the wolves to prey and stuff like that. So there's interesting cooperation that's going on. Okay. So we'll go back to the PowerPoint now. Okay, so that's practice number one, watching the internet. Okay. Okay, a second practice. This is in the realm of imagination. Second practice that I want to introduce uses the eye for cultivating our moral responsibility to animals in another way. Now I'm talking about the internal eye, the eye that sees in dreams, the eye that sees as we daydream. We rely on this eye all the time, but usually not intentionally. So here I'm adapting traditional Buddhist practices for developing compassion in order to train ourselves to intentionally conjure and then react to the suffering of animals. So this moves us away from the practice that I just described, which was enjoying the brilliance of animals, and instead turns to their plight. We could also witness this brutality. There's plenty of videos online. I'm not going to show that directly, but what I'm going to focus on is the power of imagination to do that in another way. And this comes straight out of a very old moral teaching in early Buddhism called the Four Boundless Minds, in which the meditator contemplates and summons the aspiration that all sentient beings should possess the cause of happiness. All sentient beings should avoid the cause of suffering. All sentient beings should remain unseparated from unadulterated happiness. All sentient beings should attain equanimity. So this is a very old practice in the Buddha Sutra, and the key point of the practice is to develop aspiration, to cultivate the active and recurring hope for the salvation of animals from suffering. And Tibetan and other Buddhist traditions also add to this practice the active imagination of sentient beings in these various states. And they particularly instruct students to focus on actively imagining the various type of suffering of sentient beings. Some traditions train us to imaginatively visit and review the brutal situation of many kinds of beings, from insects to wild prey, to work animals, to animals for slaughter. In addition, of course, to humans in war zones, humans in insane asylums, human under severe repression, but doing this imagination in painstaking detail. You have to develop your capacity to visualize. And then you generate a strong aspiration to all that suffering should be eliminated. Now, one of the things that's rarely mentioned in how difficult it is to hold compassion for suffering beings. Compassion involves seeing very hard to bear truth. Compassion involves great sadness. Compassion requires courage and resilience. And it may be for that reason that Tibetan Tantric Buddhist visualization tradition also adds the visualization of the Bodhisattva of compassion. It's an image here of Avalokiteshvara, or Tibetan Chenrezig, or Chinese Kuan Yin, to this practice as a way to support this active imagination of suffering beings. So instead of imagining the suffering beings yourself, you imagine yourself as the Bodhisattva. It's a much more complicated practice than I can explain right now, but you actually become the Bodhisattva in your imagination, and then you look through the Bodhisattva's eye and see the suffering of animals around you. Here's another image, same Bodhisattva. It's a particularly nice one. And actually, in some iconographical traditions, not here, the Bodhisattva actually has a tear in his eyes. So even though he's the Bodhisattva of compassion, he's crying because he sees the enormous amount of suffering on our planet. And you imagine yourself as the Bodhisattva, you imagine yourself getting the courage that the Bodhisattva has and the power. And then it's a visualization where you actively imagine this light coming out of your body and reaching all these sentient beings and actually solving their problem and saving them. I'm actually reproduced here. This is from the Biennale. This is actually a image that I just came across recently. It's in the Scuola Grande della Misericordia. It's by an artist, a Chinese artist, Zhang Fanxi, and it's called Nirvana. He wasn't actually illustrating the visualization that I just was talking about, but it's something like that. The light rays just, landing on the planet and solving all the problems. And so, obviously this is not doing anything actually. It's not actually changing things, but what it's doing is bringing together your aspiration, also for us to be able to remember and be mindful and not to turn away from that suffering. And it will bolster our resolve, and it also prepares us to envision a better future. So that's practice number 2 is actually using the power of our imagination, a different kind of eye. And then our third practice, I'm calling being with real animals, so living with. So this third practice is about seeing real animals in our world with our own eyes, in person, as it were. So it's about living with them. The greatest way to instantiate and reinforce the principle of being with is actually to be with them, to build relationships with our pets and other animals in our neighborhood. So once again, I can cite my own experience. Until developing this practice, I never would have said I needed to work to build my relationship with my cats. I always have had great relationship with my cats. And yet in intentionally being with them as a deliberate practice has vastly improved my relationship with them better, if it could even be better. It has gotten me to understand them far better than I ever did. And one of the main points of this practice is to let your pets take the lead. Don't just impose your will on them all the time. Follow them around. Let them initiate play. And I realize that for certain people with dogs who love to play, you may not always want to let them initiate play, but in general, I'm talking about a practice to follow them as opposed to imposing your will. So it's like the sort of general Buddhist mindfulness meditation, except that the focus of your meditation is on a living animal. And if it's your pet, you just do whatever they're doing, follow them around, listen, pay attention to the world as they are hearing and seeing the world. It's not easy to do. It's just as hard as regular meditation, if not harder. If they're sleeping, you just sit with them, watch them. What is their experience like? Pay attention. Are they sleeping? Are they meditating? Watch the evidence of their ears and the twitches of their body. If they're looking out the window, you look with them. And most of all, you make eye contact with them. Make eye contact with animals. You play with them. You're also closely attuned to their sense of humor. I can tell you pretty much all animals have a wild sense of humor, much more than most of us realize. You have to be in the right state of mind for it to happen. But birds, cows, elephants, as I mentioned before, turtles who enjoy playing with cats. My cats are amazingly hilarious in getting my attention and performing crazy acrobatics in order to get me into the kitchen. And when you intentionally devote your attention, when you continue to watch them, you start to see more and more of how brilliant they are at playing with you. And also, it reminds you to pay attention to their desires, their needs, rather than maintaining your human privilege over them. You will be building a muscle habit, and you will be writing that ethics into your own flesh. Just as much, this practice is also to be done with animals in your neighborhood. Even if you already have pets, stay near a tree, be with a squirrel. It's possible to make friends with a squirrel, believe it or not. You can feed them. Make friends with a bird. That's also possible. Make friends with deer. That's also possible. Remember that what you're doing is not only building relationships, you're building your capacity to have relationship. And that's really the most important thing. You're building your commitment by making eye contact in particular. And eye contact is a very, very powerful thing, which I'm really interested in. You are practicing what we need to do in our aspirational post-Anthropocene. You're practicing putting yourself on an equal footing with them. You are practicing putting yourself into relationship with other animals. You're building those muscles, making a habit. You're writing into your flesh your care for animals. It'll also bring joy. And I want to insist once again, if in case any of you are thinking this is not just obvious, it's not easy, it's not childish, nor is it womanish sentiments. It's really serious business, in my opinion. The practice to engage intentionally with real animals in our physical environment is part of a larger task that I just mentioned as urgent. We need to actively imagine what planet Earth communities with humans and animals living together, what that should look like in the future. For now, let me give you just a few examples again from the internet. So we go back to our videos briefly of people living with animals. This is one of my favorite accounts of all time. It's a Turkish guy in Istanbul. He runs a pet store. He has about 7 cats. And one of his beautiful cats got lost. So he allows the cats free reign, but they all kind of stay around him. He's talking all the time to them in Turkish. I don't understand a word that he's saying, so we can keep the sound for this. But he lost one of his fantastic cats, and then somebody in the neighborhood found him. And he's so happy that he found this cat after 2 days. He's always shouting at his cats.
Bak biz kimi bulduk bak. Biz kimi bulduk.
And look the way he walks. So
Kimi
this is,
bulduk.
obviously Istanbul is a place where there's cats all over. So that's a city where they live relatively well with lots of cats on the street. Cats are free. Now he's playing with them and feeding them. Wait, can you turn the sound up a little bit? Maybe this is not the best one, but he's just feeding them. The cat.
Tabakları seviyorum benim çocuğum. Gel gel aç.
His whole attitude. So if you
Yeah,
follow
I
me
should
on
say, yeah, that's
Instagram,
what I'm
you can get his.
Gel. Vay senin verene kurbanım ben gel.
He's like,
Şuna bak şuna.
wait,
şuna,
just
şuna.
1 second.
Yapamaz oğlum benim çocuğum yapamaz. Dışarı
He
yapamaz.
posts like 5-6 times a day of everything. And then at night, he
Şey
goes out
arasına-
every night and feeds there's wild dogs. And he goes out and feeds them. He's very matter of fact. He's not sentimental. He just loves.
Kim
them.
bilir kaç
This
gün
is
çiftlikte
other kind
yemek
of
yediniz
his.
oğlum. Yesin aslanım. Sana da açacağım. Tamam.
This is him laying around with his head, and how much he loves them and how much they live together. Okay, I'm glad that some of you are smiling. And he's so happy. This cat is the cutest cat. Okay, that's enough of that. And okay, there's 2 other videos. We're almost getting to the end. One video, unfortunately, is not available right now. I was hoping to show it, but I found out it's not available. But this is amazing. This is actually the best video of all. It's actually a video of some guy in Costa Rica in South America. Looks like indigenous person. He's standing right at the end. Wait, not this one. He's standing at the edge of a jungle, and then he calls out. You know, he makes this call, and after like a minute or 2, bounding out of the jungle comes this beautiful small panther. It's actually like maybe this big or so. Who knows him, comes bounding out of the jungle and comes up to him and stands up next to him, and they kiss each other and he pets each other, and then it goes back into the jungle. This is a wild, it's a wild panther, or it's kind of a small leopard, actually. This is amazing that, you know, and this is actually very well known, indigenous people who live with animals, wild animals in the environment, who know them, who have personal relationships with them, and they meet and they, you know, connect, and then they go away and then they go in their other direction. So, you know, just this kind of vision of living in another organization of communities, of villages, which I'm trying to get in touch with, of a kind of aspirational vision of organizing the way our houses look, our streets look, where animals are in that equation in which animals might be free and can do what they want, and humans can also live, and they live together. Let's just give you one more video there. The next one, yeah. Okay, sorry. Okay, this is the guy in I think he's in Brazil. This is also another, it's a wild parakeet and his dogs. And this, yeah, that's an example of a bird. He plays with him. This is a wild bird, but he's just like, you know, flying in. He's like great. There's actually this bird died recently, and he was really sad. But the way he plays with him, he's also talking Spanish, and I also don't understand what he's saying, but I really don't care. Anyway.
Olha, quem que aguenta isso aqui?
Ela já vai arrancar o bico da
Joking.
caneta.
I'm
Mas como é que ela
saying, you know,
sabe?
taking my
O dia
pen.
inteiro, o dia inteiro me enchendo
You can
de
tell
saco.
what they're saying even if you don't understand
Olha,
their language. And the bird also plays with the
Olha,
dogs, there's a
não.
horse there.
Se eu contar, ninguém acredita. Olha só que, olha,
And the
Enquanto
forest
bem-
is right around him.
menininha, sem vergonha, olha, foi embora.
Okay. Okay,
Não tem condição, o bicho é, olha,
we'll go back to the,
Art.
enough of this bad bird.
agora eu preciso escrever aqui o...
We'll go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so all 3 of the practices I just sketched out, seeing animals on the internet, seeing the plight of animals via our imagination, and making eye contact with any and all animals in our local environment. All, I believe, will build consciousness of the thick present and our moral imbrication within that. So I've been using the metaphor of building muscle and writing in your flesh. We can also talk in terms of emotional intelligence. We can also talk in terms of your heart's commitment. But I have to add now that it's not entirely guaranteed that love and appreciation of animals will get us all the way to where I want us to go. So this is a shoemaker who evidently loves his dog very much. They have a beautiful relationship, and yet he's working with leather. He takes the skins of cows and other creatures from their bodies and fashions them into elegant garments for wealthy, privileged human beings. Don't get me wrong, I honor this man's artistry and craft, but the image points to a real problem in my approach. Love and intimacy with animals close to us do not absolutely guarantee full ethical commitment to their welfare. And I could also give many other examples. The cattle rancher who loves and knows his animals deeply, but sends them to the slaughterhouse or even slaughters them himself. It happens. So our commitment and love need to be pervasive. They need to be universalized. They need to pertain not only to individual creatures who are close to us and with whom we've built personal relations, they need to extend more globally to all creatures. For that, implication, abstraction are necessary. So we need to intentionally extend the purview of the love we have cultivated in our practice to all the others whom we have never seen, imagined, or encountered, but whom we can infer have the same qualities and the same pull on our heart. In other words, reason, inference, logical argument re-enter the picture. This is where Kant's categorical imperative comes back. This is where the Buddhist logic of pervasive interdependence needs to reign. It is where the responsibility that we feel in our flesh is also enshrined as an ethical principle to which we assent and submit our commitment. It is where the truth that the autonomous self is a fallacy has to kick in. It is where we reinscribe the ontological reality that myself is connected to the cow self. It is where we reinscribe the ontological reality that my self-interest is connected to the cow's self-interest. And it is where most fundamentally the individualized self-interest itself has to make sacrifices. It is where we realize the equality between my stake and the mourning mother cow. And I would go back to the equal sign that I showed you before. The connection to animals that we build is not limited to obeying our cat's clever tricks to lead us into the kitchen. To fully embody that connection, we need to be strong enough to intervene in the war between generosity and greed. And for that, we need both embodied connection and principled knowledge, both the ability to see the value of animals and the discipline to enact the principle of commitment, equal sign. Okay. Larger practices. So this talk, I'm ending now. The talk has focused on one of the most dire predicaments of the Anthropocene and has presented practices that I believe will help us, thank you, to relinquish our powerful human-centered perspective and bias. Practices I described are meant to train us as individuals to see better, see animals' needs and desires, see animals' worth, see our connection and responsibility. There are many other practices with more directly pragmatic goals, practices to wield our consumer power, which is still in the hands of individuals. And I realize I'm not talking about policy on regulation, but for now I'm focusing on individual behavior, which promotes our ethical commitment and exerts pressure on the markets because of our consumer power. Never buy or eat factory farmed animal produce. That's a big one. Know where your food comes from and the conditions under which it was produced. Boycott leather and animal fur and only wear fake fur. That's also a big one. But I can personally attest to the fact that consumer power has already changed the fashion industry. It's happened in the last few years and it's quite amazing. You can now get very cute shoes and bags and they're not made from leather, in case you're worried about that. Okay. Here's something you can do, contribute to the reduction of human population on planet Earth. Got that? Okay. That's the biggest one of all. Okay. Never cage birds as pets. Never cage fish as pets. Never patronize zoos or aquariums. No rodeos or circus with animals or animal fight betting or horse racing. Never hunt for fun. Vastly reduce animal testing, eliminate animal experimentation, never ride in a horse-drawn carriage for fun, Never use musk perfume except from already dead deer. No working animals. You can see I'm going for the small to the big. No working animals, oxen, horses, camels, sled dogs, elephants, yaks, donkeys, except where they actually enjoy it and the loads are light. Never use a whip, never abuse. Avoid stepping on bugs, and yes, I'm serious. Capture bugs in your house humanely, I can tell you how, and let them free outside. If you have pets, have more than one of the same species or another friendly species. Don't leave your pet locked up alone for hours and hours. Teach your pets to go out and come back. Live in a place where you can do that. And finally, this point brings me back to my point about reimagining human settlement on planet Earth. And I'm sure this is what a lot of you are doing here at NICHE already. We urgently need to make aspirational but practical blueprints for neighborhoods in the future. Where are the cars? Where are the animals? How do the humans live harmoniously with them? Indigenous communities have a huge amount of information on this, and we need to study with them. And I'm not suggesting that we go back to a fantasized pristine past or live again in caves, nor to a crazy new age fantasy of animals taking over or return to an entirely wild planets and gatherers. We have one more video. And I'm not talking about this. No, the next one, I'm sorry. Next one. That's the same guy. I forgot to show it. I'm not talking about this. He's trying to have his lunch.
No. No.
Supposed to be laughing. This is funny. I'm not talking about this guy. He lives on a farm, I think, with like a lot of cows. This one cow's name is Bruce. I don't know. And he allows him to come in his house all the time. He's just playing around. It's just a joke. Trying to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay. Okay, thank you. So what I am talking about is a vast and foundational change in the status of animals vis-a-vis humans in the scope of things. And I hope we can build our commitment and dedication to making those changes. It's the only way for us to flourish on planet Earth. So thank you. Thanks for your attention. So we're happy to take question and answer if you want, criticism, concern, praise. Equal.
Any questions?
So I will start if nobody else wants this responsibility. So thank you very much for this multifaceted and very thought-provoking lecture. So thank you. And in the spirit of sharpening the theoretical tools, actually I should maybe stand up and present myself. I am a postdoctoral fellow at the Department of East Asian Studies and Mediterranean Africans, Northern African Studies. And my name is Jacopo Scarin. So in the light of sharpening the theoretical tools and the argumentative strategies, I would like to ask you a couple of questions. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I misrepresent your position, but it seems that this project, let's say, is founded on the idea that we should try to narrow or maybe even erase the separation between the human world and the natural world in a certain way.
Yeah, narrow.
Narrow, or okay. And at the same time, as we know, nature has different facets, has a very cute let's say side and a very cruel side. So, and I don't think you're advocating for accepting nature as it is, but just one aspect of nature, which is the, let's say, what we have seen today, not the cruel part of nature. Because if we narrow the distance from nature, then we have to decide how we narrow it, I think. So that might be an interesting thing to discuss. And related to this, so it's also this program, this project, it seems, I mean, it starts with practices, you know, like, and practices carry system of values. So we talk about ethics, so carry system of values, and system of values are predicated on ideas of a universe, of how the universe works. I would say, even say, on an ordered universe, in the sense that has some laws that define what is good and what is wrong. Otherwise, we could not define what is right or wrong and how we should behave and we should not behave. So in the end, I would like also to ask you, what is the fundamental authority that makes this universe plausible instead of any other kind of universe or any other idea of the universe plausible? And this also ties with the first question, which means maybe it's not nature in itself that, you know, we are part of nature, we should behave more, you know, like in contact with nature or with the animals, because nature has both cozy and nice aspects and cruel aspects. So maybe something else. It might be Buddhism. This is my guess, but I would like you to, you know, give us some more insights on this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. I'll try to remember. I have a lot of comments, so I'll try to remember everything you said. Let me just first say that the practice aspect of my project is kind of at the end of the book, but I do think it's a really important part of it. So a lot of the book is more theoretical, and it's also taking up all the philosophical issues about animal rights, blah, blah, and there's a big sorts of debates on the issues that you raise, which is your second question in particular. So the first question, nature as cruel. So I'm not sure that nature is so cruel. You know, I think the humans are far more cruel than any other animal. We deliberately impose cruelty on others. We deliberately torture others. I think it's very hard to point to a case like that. In the animal world, the way that nature was meant that some animals eat other animals. It's a very complex point about predation, but I don't necessarily think that that is cruelty, and I would not want to interfere with that, as some people are advocating. There are people out there who, believe it or not, want to change the genetic structure of tigers so that they no longer hunt. I mean, it just won't work. Please don't try to do that. You're not capable of doing that. But I do think the issue of cruelty and, you know, pretty much quickly, you know, devouring what you need from the herd, you know, is a very different issue about of cruelty than the kind of cruelty that human beings are very intentionally over a very long period of time, like torturing someone for years, etc. As we know, unfortunately, all too well, we're in a different league than them. I do think, though, you raise one of the most important philosophical issues that I'm struggling with in this book, namely that I am arguing that there's a way that we as humans can learn from animals, animal ways of being, and that we need to erase at least a lot of our sense of superiority over animals, which in the West, as well as in the East also, is predicated on this idea that humans are capable of rational thought, and humans have, you know, special capacities, which a part of me, as you heard in the talk, is a little bit skeptical about that, and a little bit skeptical about how far that can go. And yet, on the other hand, I am arguing for a kind of human exceptionalism to the degree that I am saying that humans should voluntarily be vegan, or at least certainly at the minimum, not participate in the animal farm, so possibly, hunting in a kind of very managed way. I'm not so sure, but in general, I'm saying humans should be especially ethical, more ethical. We're trying to improve ourselves. We're kind of looking at ourselves and saying that we need to improve ourselves, and that's not something that animals do. So in that sense, I am still arguing for a type of human exceptionalism, and I need to interrogate that. That's one of my problems in finishing the book, is to figure that out. But I think I can go with it. At least one way of answering that is humans are able to survive on types of protein and ways of eating that don't involve animal flesh. You can live very well as a vegan if you just control your diet. And since we have the capacity, we should do it. But it still raises the problem that you raise. As for the second question about the sort of subtle value system, so it is based on, as I said, this comes straight out of Buddhist philosophy, the notion of interdependence. And so I'm not convinced that the practice that I'm suggesting is necessarily begins with the values. What I'm trying to say is that by fully entering into relationship with others, which is to acknowledge our interdependence and recognize the way that we're in interdependence, is an ontology. It's what actually, it's reality. And I'll go to the mat on that. In other words, I'll fight that out, that the fact of the matter is that the world is interdependent. There's no such thing as the autonomy that Western philosophers imagine for human beings. So therefore, it's not necessarily based on an existing value system. I think it's honoring the reality of what actually is, and that you just become more aware of it, is what I'm trying to say. But I'm happy to argue further with you about that. But anyway. Other questions? There's a question in the front. Yeah. Okay.
I think we have a question from the
Okay,
people
sure.
online.
Hi, Professor. Can you hear me all right? Hello?
Oh, nice.
Professor Gyatso, can you hear me okay?
We can't hear you. Let's see.
This is my
Hello?
student.
Oh, hi.
Hello? Testing, testing.
Yeah.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this talk. It's really lovely to get to watch all the way from the United States. And I appreciate so much your turn towards an embodied practice, a local being with. And if you'll excuse an abstract question, otherwise what I think is a beautifully concrete talk that you gave, I have a question about this ontology that you raised. You spoke of the ontology of interbeing as a fact that we nonetheless need to cultivate. And I'm curious about the tension that I sense there, about something that is a fact that we nonetheless must endeavor to realize. And you know me and my commitments, and this is something that I struggle with to understand. And I'm just curious if you could just speak a little bit to maybe the tension that exists in acknowledging the ontology as fact and nonetheless exhorting a kind of practice in order to realize it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. This is a student in my classes at Harvard, so I know him very well. One of my many wonderful students. The problem that you raise is a major issue for Buddhism. It's also an issue for Taoism and other traditions, is given that the fact of the matter is that we all are interdependent, why do we need to do anything? Why should we not, appreciate things as perfect already? Why can't we just sort of simply be, because already the being is governed by this principle of interdependence? And it's a hard question. I don't know that Buddhist philosophy can answer it entirely. What Buddhists say, what Buddhist philosophers say, they use the term adventitious, which means not necessarily by accident, but it just happened that things in the development of consciousness and the development of sentience, things get twisted around and doubled back on top of themselves to the point that you lose track of where you're coming from. Things get overly complicated and we're losing track of the connection between the root or the basic state of reality, according to these kind of philosophies, and actual everyday practice. And we become ignorant, we forget, or we lose track of. And so we need a struggle to actually get rid of those obstacles to get back to something that we, in a certain sense, already always knew. So that's a problem, but that's the best that I can do to answer. I think that there are many things. So our existence and our life is very, very complicated, and we have different levels of awareness and knowledge, and not all of them are consistent with each other. I think we know that very well. So our rational minds are often not consistent with our emotions. They're often not consistent with the way our bodies feel. And so it's not necessarily the case that everything is clear and consistent. And that's why we have a problem. And that's why we need practices to understand the relationship and how one thing leads to another, and also how to turn that process around and get back more in touch with what is more true. And there are superficial truths and there are very basic truths. And there's all kinds of things that are true at certain levels, but they're not true at other levels. And we can thank language for that, because language makes that possible. And we can thank types of rational thinking, which also make that possible. And that's, usually when I've asked many Buddhist teachers about that in the past, they said, don't worry about that. It's just the way that things are. So you need to work on it. Why? I can't really tell you, but that's just the way it is. But anyway, thanks for your question. And we had a question here in the front, and there's some people back there. Yeah.
I just wanted to maybe return to an example that you mentioned, but that you glossed over a little bit, but that I find very interesting in this field that you're setting out, of the farmer who loves his animals, knows his animals very well, and yet still perhaps kills them, because this has also been my experience in meeting people who are not even necessarily farmers, but have animals for their own use, strictly. Of people who, especially with the third practice that you suggest, have probably more experience than any city dweller could ever have. But this kind of practice, even for those who are sensitive to it, doesn't necessarily lead them to the same kind of ethical stance that you describe. And I wonder also if this isn't indicative of a split that I sense between these practices, that those who are interested in this and already want to deepen an affinity with non-humans can choose to begin, and those who can simply continue to not be interested in this and go on with their lives, or simply don't have the privileged position to be able to pursue this kind of resonance with non-humans.
Yeah. No, it's definitely an important issue. And, one of the things you can cite is with farmers who are trying to make a living and their family depends on it. And so therefore, understanding this is a way of making, living and making money and living in the world. And therefore, and, this is what I'm also trying to work out. And actually the Buddhist tradition has a lot to say about the connection, again, between our rational mind and our emotional being, and how to bridge those together. So there's a lot more to say about it. So I do think, on the one hand, human beings, even people who have never gone to university and studied philosophy, the sort of idea in Christianity, in most of the major world religions, including Buddhism, have taught us that humans are the superior species on Earth. It's a really, widespread idea, and it's also, very extensively talked about in philosophy. And I think that idea is a legitimation that people say to themselves. I think when the farmer who has a very, very close relationship with the cow and talk about eye contact, that moment when the farmer has to slaughter the cow has to be conflicted. But he says to himself, it's okay because actually God put us, in charge of the animals we need to live. He has a legitimation, he has a rationalization that he's using, and maybe also the degree of emotional connection that he has cultivated with animals is not complete as it might be. I don't see how someone who honestly puts themselves, directly in relationship with an animal, and again, that eye contact, how you can put the knife in their throat. I don't know how you could do that. So I only have to say it's a big problem, and I definitely, that's why I brought it up. This is not going to be easy. My idea is extremely, idealistic, and whether, human beings are ever going to really listen to me other than a couple of good friends like you guys, is questionable, but I'm using my own experience of love and relationship as something. I do believe that if we develop that as powerfully and as honestly as we can, and we also have a rationalization, which, we can use utilitarian ethics or deontological ethics or virtue ethics. So I could talk through the reasons for why it is the case, which is another lecture entirely. I think that if we bring those together, we change minds and people will change, but it's a problem. Do you have a follow-up? You look like you do.
Very brief, let's say.
Yeah.
I absolutely take everything that you mentioned. It's just that I think this kind of situation also for me ties into your ultimate point that this kind of ethical stance requires sacrifice on the part of the humans.
Yeah.
And that means very different things in different situations, whether it means simply buying a non-leather pair of shoes or completely changing one's livelihood. So I was curious to see how this kind of bridging takes place when the material collections between the human and non-humans are more, I don't know, substantial for the human's livelihood, where that sacrifice would be significantly greater.
Yeah. So the sacrifice would be greater for the privileged classes and the rich than it is for the poor. Because the poor are already living in that way already in many kinds of ways. So the sacrifice is greater. I'm forgetting the rest of your question. When you look at India, for example, which is largely vegetarian, so, and people who live very closely with animals, it just so happens that Indians worship cows. Indians saw, cows have beautiful eyes, if you probably know very well, better than me. They have beautiful eyes with long eyelashes, and as you saw, the kind of grace and love, and they just love them, and they can't kill them. And they eat rice and dal, and then they get a full protein in their bodies. So I am very, very sensitive to this notion of privileged people like me, who I go to a very fancy supermarket where they have these new vegan foods, and I'm wearing, and I have access to the internet, and I'm buying fake fur, and I realize that is a issue of privilege, but I don't think that what I'm trying to say would be limited to the privileged classes. I really don't think. And I have one more really important principle to leave you with, which is don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. In other words, just because we can't do it fully, we need to start. And as much as we start, the more that we do, the better, even if we don't do it perfectly. And not everybody is doing it, you know, just reducing our impact on the world and doing as much as we can. It's all for the better, even if it's not 100%. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you so much for the lecture. I was wondering, since you've mentioned a lot of the examples of animals that are represented on Instagram and online on video, I heard that there is a lot of debate around like how we can observe animals, and not only on social media, but also there are like some hidden cameras installed in like national parks and reserved areas. And I was wondering whether you could comment whether the gaze comes into play here, because we as humans, if the gaze of humans directed to the non-humans comes into play of being with animals, or does it create any power imbalance in your perspective, or how we can address that? Thank you.
Yeah, that's another great question, and that's true. And one of the critiques, you know, there are a bunch of photographers out there who figured out that I'm watching and I want to see more animal videos, and they're kind of going around and being very intrusive. And so it can be a problem. There are also photographers who are very, very careful and set up live cameras and go away. So it all depends on how you do it. But what you mentioned is definitely a danger and something else to be very careful about. So, you know, the human gaze, you know, when you set up a live camera in a spot and it just captures animals going by, usually at night, the human being's not there, the camera's there for, you know, 6 months. It is a really, really important tool for us to understand what's going on. And especially if we're trying to, you know, make sure that we're trying to protect species, we need to know how many wolves are in this area, you know, how many pumas are in this area. So it's really, really important, but we have to be very careful that we're not intruding on their space, on their wild space. So it's just, it's a balance. But I think it's possible, and I think it has to be done with care, but I do actually also think it's really important. You know, I'm not sure if the gaze that we get, you know, so the camera records and then the photographer takes it and puts it on social media, and then, you know, Janet in her house in Cambridge, Mass is watching. That's my, you know, I'm not sure that, you know, that's a human gaze entirely. I'm not sure that my gaze is necessarily entirely human. I'm not sure that everything that I do and everything that I see is defined by me being human, actually. This is just to make a more complicated point than maybe you were making. You know, so for example, the famous philosopher, what's his name? What is it like to be a bat? Thomas, what? Nagel, thank you. Thomas Nagel argues that even if I try to imagine what it's like to be a bat, I'll be always imagining it as a human. So I'm never going to be able to understand what it's like to be a bat. And I think that there's a real fallacy in that idea. It's technically what's called begging the question. It's to assume in advance what you're trying to prove. So it's to assume that that everything about that humans and animals are absolutely separate, which is exactly what we're contesting and trying to imagine what it's like to be them. So I don't think that, you know, when you look at me, my body, everything about me is not all, it's not human. There's a lot of stuff that's very human, but there's a lot of stuff, that's what I'm trying to say. There's emotions and feelings and perceptions and knowledge, which is very animal, you know, and so I'm not all human. And just because I'm doing something, it's a issue in logic. It's called adequation. It's like saying that a part of me governs the entirety of me. And I think that that's actually an error. So what I'm actually saying is that if we observe very closely, and I think that our observation power is very, very nuanced and very intelligent, we can see a lot of things. I think we can see a lot more than what Thomas Nagel thinks. In order to understand what it's like to be a bat, I need to get inside the bat and I need to actually be a bat. But I think that you actually can know a lot of internal experience by looking from the outside. Not 100%, again, I'm not saying 100%, 54%, 76%, that's still a lot, and so we shouldn't, it still means a lot of empathy, and to rule it out from the get-go that everything you do is tainted by being a human, I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true. But your question, which was more specific, I definitely agree that that's an issue, that we need to be very aware of. So thanks for that. Any other questions? Yeah. You have get a mic.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think what you just said last is what I take from this talk, and which I managed to appreciate, really training the observation and the capacity to tune in and to see what happens in that intimate space. But I'm quite puzzled, to be honest, by the conclusions you jumped to in this, which you stated yourself as a problematic, as a thing you don't quite know how it can be sitting together with Buddhism. I'm not doing religious studies, so I'm foreign to this field, but I think the ethical imperative is not very helpful, both in the sense that it risks to anthropomorphize or jump, or like all the videos we saw and the way we talked about them rather accentuated the human nature dualism, rather than seeing how blurred and how interconnected and how much they're together. Because what I mostly saw were animals attuning to human ways of being, because most of the videos were animals in human environments who adopted and played with and managed to adapt to human ways of being. And the beautiful thing was, what happened with me was that I managed to capture that and interact in a playful way with the animal that is entering into relation with me, but not. And I think so. This what you named yourself, a human exceptionalist problem in jumping to the conclusion that therefore we should avoid eating them. I think it just it's a shame to not stay with that trouble and be present in a Buddhist or Taoist way of being with that complexity, seeing how myself I don't manage to live love in a purist way, in the sense that I damage myself with myself. I eat ice cream even though it doesn't do me good. I tell my partner I hate him even though I love him. Staying with that thing, killing as you were saying, the farmer killing its animals, looking into their eyes and staying with that. I think that's what it is about, staying in this, like learning to watch, learning to be there, learning to attune. But I think it's just it's really a shame to
reintroduce the logic, you mean, and
the Kantian problem that you brought up, because
Well, okay. I'm just thinking about myself. So I very much appreciate your question. You were citing Donna Haraway and staying with the trouble, which I very much am also trying to stay with that trouble. I'm imagining myself, I'm with my friends at a restaurant. I was grown up, my family, my mom served meat all the time. I like meat a lot. Sort of, I desire it. And I'm looking at the menu. This is honest. It's going to happen tonight at our restaurant, but I'm definitely ordering vegetarian. No, but I'm looking at the restaurant, the thing, and I am saying, I want that lamb chop. And I'm saying, no, there's a menu that says lamb chop and there's a smell coming out of the kitchen and there's a plate that's going to come to me and is a desire. And I know because I remember and I know and I have knowledge that that came from a beautiful sweet lamb who was, with his mom. And there's a war going on. And there's a moment when I make a choice. And I think that to make the choice, the reason is also a very, very powerful tool. So yeah, that's what I think. I don't think that we can do away with reason and rationality and the presumptions of logic need to be framed. They need to be contextualized. They need to be relativized in terms of what they're assuming, but it doesn't mean that we write them off. And the other point I would say is it's not only humans who use inference. So one of the things I'm arguing, animals use abstraction. Animals use inference. Animals have a second order and third order way of thinking as well. So that's again, not necessarily a human thing. It is a complicated problem, and I thank you for calling me out on it, and I'd love to talk more, but thank you. Okay.
I have a
one more
question. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the talk. I'm very inspired, and I have many things I want to say. But before getting to my question, I had some thought about an earlier question about how like everything is interconnected, and so isn't it like already a kind of considered perfect state? And why do we need to make a change? Why do we need to do anything about it? And I thought about it, and then I don't know if this is the right answer, but I think it's part of it is because it's impacting humans. And I think if humans can continue living safely, then if other species are the only ones impacted and going extinct, then maybe like we are not as concerned, right? But then that's the human-centric way of thinking.
Yeah, but that's also a big mistake because
Yes, I know it's a mistake. Yes, yes.
to imagine life on planet Earth
Right.
without any other animals, I
Yeah,
can't
no,
do it. Yeah.
I think that's what's like. I mean, something that I've been like really like cultivating here in the environmental humanities programs, because I myself as a Buddhist practitioner, but like I've been reflecting myself, self-criticizing like how my practice has been so like human-centered, because it's all about has all about being like self-improvement or like relationship with other human beings, and I wasn't thinking so much about the other like non-humans.
Yeah.
And so here in the environmental humanities program, I think we are all learning about the multi-species perspectives. And so, yeah, and then so I really appreciate how you showed us like, how animals have the, feelings, emotions, and they have the ability to interact with each other, care for each other, like, like stopping the fight or, like helping other species when they see the danger in the dangerous situation. And so I'm like, it just came up to my mind. Okay, so from the, for example, from a Buddhist perspective, in a way though, I'm seeing like, for example, cows, it could be like, it's such a special species because cows has always been vegetarian all their lives, and they practice non-violence, and they, this is probably not their choice, but then they've been giving their lives to other species, which is human beings. And so.
And lions.
Hmm?
And lions and wolves.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so what I'm trying to say is that, so I have this question. So in the Buddhist teachings, we say, I mean, it's a common thing to say that, okay, you know, it's the teaching says that, you know, like it's a special moment that that we are born into human beings. That's why we can hear the Dharma, we can,
Yeah.
you know, like we encounter the Buddha teaching, so we have the opportunity to attain enlightenment, right? But then, do you think that you know, based on your understanding how humans and non-humans are, you know, I mean, the animals also has intelligence and all this. Do you think they also have the
Capacity for enlightenment?
yes, yes.
Um, I don't like that idea that, and I'm not certain that, you know, human beings are superior. And if you ask me, and actually I remember having a conversation with some friends when COVID started, that if we could push a button right now and get rid of all the humans and just have animals on the planet, would I be willing to do that? We get rid of human culture and art and Venice and all these other things and just have animals. I think I probably would do it because human beings are screwed up. There's no question. Human beings are responsible for a huge, you know, crisis that we have right now. I think you know, I take Buddhist ideas very, very seriously. I have learned enormously from Buddhism. I personally don't believe, okay, I'm on the line right now in front of the world. I don't believe in perfect enlightenment. I don't think it's possible. And so I don't think humans can get enlightened. I don't think Buddha Shakyamuni was 100% like omniscient. I don't think that's possible. And I think that there is a possibility for animals to live in a kind of harmonious environment in which there is trouble. They always, for example, are fending off predation, and they're always competing with each other. It's not, you know, a kind of total utopia where everything is perfect, and it never will be that way for humans, and it never will be that way for animals. I'm not convinced that the human kind of highest capacity is superior to the animal. There's parts of me, I'm not sure, but there's parts of me that value animals more than humans. So I'll go on the record to say
Thank
that.
you. Yeah, I mean, I do kind of think that it's kind of unrealistic, almost like unnatural.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all so much. You guys raised some excellent questions, and I could see that you're thinking hard about the issues. Thank you again. It really was a pleasure for me. It helps me a lot in my own work to have a good audience and to get some really, really good questions. And if any of you want to write to me, I'd be very happy to talk to you. And also do follow me on Instagram because I have really excellent feeds. So, okay, thanks a lot.